A few weeks ago, Harrison emailed me and asked me if I'd be willing to be a speaker here for this brownfields and transit-oriented development. I said I'd be more than happy to. What I didn't know was that I was the keynote luncheon speaker, and we all know there's no free lunch, But it also reminded me of my ghosts that I have in the wall of my office. You guys are probably wondering what that may be, and I'll tell you a little story. A friend of mine, a developer friend of mine, in 1992, imagine this, 23 years ago already, faxed this to me. It's black and white. And about 10 years ago, I had it commissioned to be colored up. But I look at it nearly every day to remind myself. There we go. There's my ghost. I will develop real estate for food. And as today I'm speaking and entertaining all of you for food, Uh, so it's really behind, right on my desk in the wall of my office to remind myself that in the business that we're in, not to screw up. So I'm going to give you a little orientation of Keauhou Place. And it's a project that Kamehameha Schools first approached us 3 years ago. And I like to think that it was waiting for me to grow up. But this is a map of Kaka'ako. Era was about 1922. And Keauhou Place is along this whole block of South Street, Halikuila, Keawe, and Pohokaina. And you see that little lane that bifurcates the entire block? That's Keauhou Lane. So we're resurrecting a lane that once existed because people were a little confused when we came up with the project's name, Keauhou Place. People said, is that the Big Island? Keauhou Resort on the Big Island. But no, this is a lane that existed. And Keauhou translates to transformation. And what more appropriate name of what's going on in Kaka'ako today? A retransformation back to a vibrant mixed-use residential community as it once was in the 30s, 20s, 30s. And then as it evolved, as the suburbs were built on the outskirts of Honolulu, it evolved into a commercial and industrial district. So this property was all assembled by Bruce Stark back in the late 80s. It actually was very befitting that today I'm speaking here before you on Brownfields, because this site in 1914, at the turn of the century, there was a Chinese laundry facility, the stables, there were associated buildings to the Honolulu Iron Works. And over the years, there were other businesses that resided on this site, such as auto repair shops and a Melco gas station, American Electric. So it was stored with a lot of transformers. So you had PCB contamination, hydrocarbons. And so it had to go through an extensive soil bioremediation from the late 80s through the early 90s. And here is a aerial photograph of 1991 circa, when Bruce Stark was actually still doing the bioremediation of the site. This is Halikuila Street, South Street, Pohokaina, and Keawe. The scary part is I remember this property going through all of this 24 years ago. So, by the time the cleanup was completed, Bruce had missed the market. Kamehameha Schools took the property back. He did all the heavy lifting. He assembled the site, did all of the phased environmental work, the bioremediation, and for the last 24 years, this site has been a parking lot. And as I said, hopefully, I like to think he was waiting for me to grow up. In any event, 3 years ago, Kamehameha Schools approached us, want to develop this property. And it was also designated as a transit station, the Honolulu Civics Transit Station, that'll be located along Halikuila. And, you know, I really didn't know whether having a transit station on our site was an asset or a liability. So one of the first things I did was flew up to the Vancouver transit system to experience that from Vancouver International Airport through Richmond, through downtown Vancouver to the waterfront. And my takeaway from that experience was this is truly an asset. Let's capitalize on this. Let's design a TOD project that defines transit-oriented development. Let's create a neighborhood that has neighborhood services. Let's create a neighborhood that not only offers home ownership and entry-level for-sale housing, but also rental housing. Because not everyone who wants to live here is committed to purchasing yet. You know, it may be a cancer research contract worker or the medical school visiting professor that needs to be here for a 2-3 year period, but wants to live nearby in a clean, convenient environment to be able to walk to work. And so we started working on defining what shall this station be. Now in 2012, the rail was still in, it was still up in the air. There was ongoing litigation. There was a chance that it could have died if the votes didn't come in as they did. And so we had to design this, with that in mind, and to leave ourselves a back door. So one of the first things we did was approach HART and to find out what was the design, the existing plan designs for this civic station. And so this is the plan here up on the boards. And you can see this is Haleakala, and they provided pretty ample open space along the corner of South Street and Haleakala. But the rest of the site has just been cannibalized. I mean, it just was just not inviting. And can you imagine if you're walking ever-bound along Haleakala, and this is what is called the TPSS. It's actually a power substation. And it's not something that's going to be very inviting at the corner of your block here. And so we commissioned a rendering. And we took this to heart to meet with the design consultants, both in-house and outside. And the purpose of this was to provoke what should the transit station look like and feel like. That it should be inviting. It should be activated. That you should be providing amenities, retail amenities and services for those that are utilizing the transit, people that are embarking and disembarking. And that the orientation should be internalized. So what we did was, I'm going to talk a little bit more and spend some time on this site plan because this is where a lot of brain damage went into designing this super block. This is the transit station as we completed the design with heart. And what we did was respected the corners of South and Haleakala and Keauhou and Haleakala so that it becomes more of an urban park. It's inviting. You'll want to lead to continue to walk through this neighborhood. Keauhou Lane is resurrected along this retail promenade. And this promenade will connect with the mid-block crossing with the joint venture that Kamehameha Schools is doing with Castle and Cook on Block B, the Lofts, 400 Keauhou Street, where again, there will be more ground floor retail, rental apartments up above, and entry-level for-sale condominiums. It'll then lead you on to the collection that's now under construction directly across the SALT project that's nearing completion. So this is going to be quite a exciting and vibrant neighborhood where people can truly live, work, play. So the HART Transit Station here, as you can see, we've enriched it with landscape and hardscape. And these are architectural interpretations celebrating the heritage and the history of the neighborhood. One of the things we did is Keauhou, resurrecting the name, meaning transformation. But our logo represents Kuahivi, the mountains of the Ahupuaha, all the way down to the ocean. And so that celebration of the history of the land area, these lands back in the day in the 1800s was used to make salt. And salt was a commodity that was used to trade with the sea merchants. And so I will share with you a little bit about that in some other architectural motifs that we've designed and incorporated in the building. But as you can see here, the red and the brown represent what was once the salt ponds that existed on these properties here in Kaka'ako. There are also within this district fish ponds, and there you see the tinsels of netting representing and celebrating the history of the fish ponds that existed through this area down to the Ward District. The tapa beating patterns to give you directional lineage. The ililele, which is the jumping trails that people traverse going Mauka Makai, Diamond Head Eva to get around salt ponds, fish ponds, and different land ownerships. So what we wanted to do was incorporate this history, the heritage of the area, into the hardscapes. As we walk around Keauhou Street, on the ground floor and flanked by the pedestrian promenade is Keauhou Lane, where we have 40,000 square feet of ground floor neighborhood retail services. This will be retained by the ownership of Kamehameha Schools, and up above this, the ground floor retail are 209 rental apartments for those who want to rent, live in the district, but not are committed to be a homeowner yet. Very wide and generous sidewalks along Keauhou Street so that it'll allow for cafes to spill out onto the sidewalks, but still provide ample room for pedestrian access. And as you walk through Keauhou Lane, you're coming down the disembark from the transit, the front lobby and the front door of Keauhou Place is right along here. That's the front lobby, and rising out of the middle of the block is our 400-foot tower consisting of 388 1, 2, and 3-bedroom condominiums in a 43-story building. As you walk around the block along Pohukaina, we have a generous 15-foot front yard setback along Pohukaina with 4 levels of townhouses. And this is for families that don't want to live in a high-rise living, but want to be closer to ground level, and it enables us to achieve a lot more architectural superior streetscapes so that you're not walking along a 400-foot high-rise, but literally a 4-story building, exuding the architecture of the neighborhood and creating a much more humanistic scale and walkable community. We continue that setbacks and townhouses along South Street. And along South Street, because it is such a very wide boulevard, we set back the townhouses 30 feet from the property line. We've worked with the city, and given that this is going to be a transit station and the rail will be coming through, we did some traffic studies, commissioned the studies, and we are planning to change South Street to a bi-directional, going both Mauka Makai, which is right now all Mauka oriented. So there will be a bicycle track along the Eva end of South Street, and there will be bi-directional vehicular traffic along South Street that will improve the vehicular circulation in this district. Halikuwila, once rail is in operation, will turn into a one-way Diamond Head oriented and a bike lane. So as you can see, the entire perimeter of our block, you're really not seeing any high-rises. You got the transit station, you've got 5 levels of apartments above 40,000 feet of ground floor retail. We've got 35 townhouses that wrap the Makai and Eva end of the parking structure that consists of 1,030 parking stalls. Those stalls are to accommodate park and ride, the rental apartments, the 40,000 feet of commercial, as well as the residents of Keauhou Place. What you see here is the 8th floor recreation deck. I'll speak to that a little later. Within our parking structure, along the ground floor, we have about 14 parking stalls. And once rail will come into operation, those parking stalls would be converted to ground floor retail to serve the pedestrian and passengers or transient patrons. This 24-foot wide, we call it the Wuna. Think of it as another Fort Street Mall. So this was our way of mitigating the risk that in the event if rail was to have failed, that it was never to be built, that we had the geometric depth to recreate either more ground floor commercial along Halikuwila with residential up above, or at least provide for more townhouses along Halikuwila. But fortunately, it all worked out. This now becomes our service lane to service the retail in the early mornings, Thereafter, the bollards go up, and this pedestrian Woodruff becomes our own rendition of a 4th Street Mall or a 3rd Street Promenade. And again, the integrated, enriched hardscape and landscape really incorporates and integrates the entire block that you'd never known there are 3 separate landowners here. This is a massing study of the buildings with the design of the transit station and the guideway. So there's a little rendering of the corner of Keauhou. This is Keauhou and Pohukaina. So this is the ground floor retail, neighborhood retail, the rental apartments up above, and rising out of the middle of the block is Keauhou Place. And what you see in the elevator core are our interpretations of the history of this rich land area, of the heritage. And starting from the top, representing the Ko'olau Mountains, the Kuahivi, the Ko'olau Ranges and the peaks. Lo'oi Kalo, which represents the taro patches that once existed further inland. Ililele, again, the traversing the jumping trails between the different landowners. And Pa'akai, representing the salt that was once made here on these lands. And Kai, the ocean. All of these architectural motifs are then incorporated into the exterior elevator core of our building. This is a rendering of Pohukaina Street. Again, the townhouses along Pohukaina. You see the apartments here above the neighborhood retail. This is the corner of South Street and Pohukaina. You can see the rooftop of our 8th floor roof deck. The townhouses along South Street. And again, the 30-foot front yard setback. We've got a generous wide 15-foot sidewalk, pedestrian walkway that's flanked with a double-lined rainbow shower trees. A little rendering further back along South in Pohukaina. You can see how we articulate the architecture of the window wall up the building, enclosing lanais, offering larger living spaces in the penthouse units, but also giving it some visual interest as you look at the elevation of the building. There's a rendering of riding the transit leading to the, I hope it will be called Keauhou Station, on a Saturday afternoon after a winning UH game, you know. Here you see the 8th floor of the rec deck. And as you disembark the station, walking down Keauhou Lane, where you can enter the front lobby of Keauhou Place or patronize many of the local merchants that will serve the community here. You can see the pedestrian bridge up above that connects the apartments that reside on the Keauhou Street side of the block that lead you to the apartments along the Eva Inn and giving you access to some of the recreation amenities as well as the parking structure. Our 8th floor recreation deck where we have enclaves of barbecue areas, a covered sunscreen tot lot. There's no putting green. Sorry, you're going to have to go to somewhere else if you want a putting green. This project is designed with family orientation in mind. On the 8th floor rec deck, we also have a rec room for larger parties. We have our fitness center, secret garden. In the backdrop, right across the street, you see our proud Hawaii project, our rental that we completed in 2014. Our 8th floor pool deck, and again, you can see the barbecue enclaves, the secret garden there off to the distance, the fitness center that overlooks that secret garden. By the way, if you haven't been to our sales gallery, please go to Restaurant Row on the Eva Inn of Building 3, Keauhou Place Sales Gallery. It's staffed by locations. We're 80% already pre-sold. Here's a little bit of interior shots of a 3-bedroom unit up on the 40th floor overlooking the Cancer Research Center and the JABSOM John A. Burns Medical School, Kewalo Basin. You're looking at 9'2" ceiling heights here, you know, island-style living with an island in the kitchen, walk-in pantry. We've used anigre wood cabinetry from Africa, under cabinet lighting, ceramic tile wainscots with quartz countertops, all standard features. And then a view of the master bedroom looking out over Keauhou Park and the master bathroom. And that's it. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you very much, Stanford. The question I have is, does anybody out there have questions for Stanford? There's a question from the Bank of Hawaii. Oh, keep the questions coming for a few more minutes. We've got 4 microphones, and I'm going to turn this over to Stanford.
I got a loud voice, so I really don't need a mic, but no more questions? Are you talking about at the transit station, or? It's concrete, so there is some permeability, but a lot of landscape. If you look at a lot more open landscape than you would normally see in a high-rise development, such as the setbacks along South Street and Pohukaina Street. As you saw through the renderings, we try to create the traditional neighborhood scene where you've got the county right-of-way, roadway, curb, then parkway, then sidewalk, and then more front yard landscaping before walking up to the stoop of the townhouses. So that it enables us to have that traditional neighborhood street scene with canopy trees to create the shading.
Another question? While we're waiting, how about what do you, Stanford, what have you seen, or what do you feel are your biggest challenges with the developments?
Market risk. I mean, but it's all timing. I mean, you can see what happened with Bruce was planning he cleaned up this site. He did all the heavy lifting, did the assemblage, did all the environmental cleanup. But with the implosion of the Japan economy in 1990, in April of 1990, in 1991, with the commencement of Desert Storm, Hawaii saw probably one of those longest recessions through the late 90s. That was a long one. And so Bruce lost all the money that he invested in the pre-development of Water Park Towers, which was planned for this property. It was going to be the encore to one waterfront towers, which was a huge success for him. But the market was gone. And so it's all timing. So we're in a race against time. I'm glad to say that we're breaking ground next week, Wednesday. We're giving the notice to proceed, and we're turning the spades in the ground next week, Wednesday.
Another question there.
Thank you, Stanford, for all these years that you've been contributing to our society here and bringing some quality developments. My question is in terms of investments. I know like in the 80s, we had a lot of investment from Japan and stuff. And but now I know there's a lot of investments maybe coming from China. And how you kind of foresee that? I know that there's like an EB5 green card investment as well, but how are we going to try to, have you seen some of the investors from China approaching you and see some kind of developments that?
There's quite a bit of interest by Chinese investors. Obviously, they're trying to get their money out of China and repatronize it here in America. Some of the high-profile projects that they've acquired is the Waldorf Astoria in New York, where they paid over $1 billion for that prized property. I don't think you're going to see the I call it the impulsive, compulsive shopping spree of the late 80s that the Japanese invested across the country. The Chinese are much more prudent investors. And so they're taking the time in their due diligence to really understand the market risks as well as the political risks in what they're buying here.
I have a question. There was a discussion earlier about infrastructure financing. How did you, what infrastructure were you required to pay for, and how did you pay for it?
So we've got some road widening and along South Street as well as Keauhou Street, some off-site improvements. With respect to sewer, water, drainage, it's all there. What you may have read in the papers that there was insufficient capacity in Keauhou, that's the farthest from the truth. The problem in Keauhou with respect to sewer is an operational issue. There really isn't enough toilets being flushed. The system was designed to have a lot more density and capacity that exists today. As you know, that this district was designated in 1976 as a redevelopment, and you started seeing new buildings being built about 30 years ago with Colin De Silva's Royal Capitol Plaza and Bruce Stark's One Waterfront. So as far as Keauhou, the infrastructure that exists that has been invested for the last 30 years by the state is got sufficient capacity. There are other parts of our city that have antiquated infrastructure that unless we expand and redevelop the antiquated sewer water lines, we're not going to be able to see redevelopment along the rail line. I think that's where the city needs to be a little bit more proactive. We're in discussions with them. We are having some very, very constructive discussions about creating community facilities district bond financing, where you float a bond, put the infrastructure in, and those bonds are then serviced by a surcharge on the real property tax bill for the people that reside in that district.
Thank you. One last question from Christine.
Stanford, thank you so much for being a great developer. So you make all of us look good. But I'd like to, among friends here, could you please enlighten us on how long it's taken you, because it's a TOD project, if there are additional layers of process and how much more time that might have taken and how much more investment that might have taken?
Sure. Well, in this case, because the authority resides with HCDA, we shared our plans and discussions with the city. We've routed all of the plans through the various city agency departments for sign-off for building permits. Is for our experience on this particular project, it hasn't been an arduous one. I think it may be a little more unknown with respect to other neighborhoods outside of the HCDA Keauhou district, where the full authority relies on DPP and the new transit-oriented development rules that are being contemplated to be adopted by the city council. So, you know, it's kind of, we'll see as we go. But you know, there's a great collaboration going on with the city, the development community, the building industry, to make sure that the impediments are identified ahead of time so that we can avoid an arduous and extensive review process, and so that we all know the rules and regs, so that there's a lot more certainty along taking the project through approvals.
Thank you.
Did I say that all right, Harrison?
Yes.
Okay. Did I earn my lunch yet?
So, well, once again, let's thank Stanford for being here. Very much appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
And we're going to resume our program in about 5 minutes. So if you want to grab a refill or something, please do that.